Welcome back to Topical Economics. If you haven't subscribed yet, then please hit the bell button and subscribe to our channel to stay updated and not miss any videos. In today's video, we're diving into some key economics concepts surrounding living standards. I will be walking you through a few multiple-choice questions from past papers, explaining why the correct answer is the best choice and breaking down why the other options fall short. Whether you're studying for exams or just want to strengthen your understanding of economics, this video will help clarify some important ideas. So grab your notes, get ready to test your knowledge, and let's jump right in. Starting with the first question. Which components, in addition to gross domestic product, GDP, per head, are included in the Human Development Index, HDI? A. Average earnings and inequalities of incomes. B. Balance of trade and balance of payments. C. Life expectancy at birth and expected years of schooling. D. Size of population and age structure of population. This question is from year 2022 May-June version 3. The correct answer for this question is option C. Life expectancy at birth and expected years of schooling. The Human Development Index, HDI, is a composite index used to measure and compare the overall well-being and quality of life in countries. It includes three main dimensions. Life expectancy at birth, a measure of the health and longevity of a population. Expected years of schooling, the total number of years of schooling a child of school entry age can expect to receive, assuming age-specific enrollment ratios remain the same throughout the child's life. Mean years of schooling, the average number of years of education received by people aged 25 and older. Gross national income, GNI, per capita, a measure of the standard of living and economic well-being. Analysis. The other options. Option A. Average earnings and inequalities of incomes. While income is considered through GNI per capita, the HDI does not directly incorporate income inequality or specific earnings data. The index focuses on the general economic standard, GNI per capita, rather than the distribution of wealth. Next, option B. Balance of trade and balance of payments. These are economic indicators related to a country's international trade and financial transactions. They are not part of the HDI. HDI is concerned with human well-being indicators, not external economic trade data. Lastly, option D. Size of population and age structure of population. The size and age structure of the population may influence a country's economic and social development, but they are not components of the HDI. The HDI focuses on measurable factors related to health, education, and standard of living. Moving to the second question. Why would standards of living fall when there is a recession? A. The government would increase taxes to combat the recession. B. The purchasing power of households would fall. C. The value of the domestic currency would increase. D. There would be a rise in the level of immigration. This question is from year 2022 May-June version 1. The correct answer for this question is option B. The purchasing power of households would fall. During a recession, economic activity slows down, leading to lower consumer confidence, higher unemployment, and reduced wages. As a result, households experience a decrease in income, which directly impacts their ability to afford goods and services. This reduction in income results in a fall in purchasing power, meaning people can buy less with the same amount of money. The decline in purchasing power is a major factor leading to a fall in living standards during a recession. Analyzing the other options. Option A. The government would increase taxes to combat the recession is unlikely to be true in the context of a recession. During economic downturns, governments usually try to stimulate the economy rather than increase taxes. They may reduce taxes or increase public spending to encourage demand and investment. In fact, higher taxes during a recession would typically worsen economic conditions and further reduce household disposable income. So, this is not a primary cause of falling living standards during a recession. Next, option C. The value of the domestic currency would increase. In a recession, it's more typical for the value of a country's currency to decrease, not increase. A weaker currency can lead to higher import prices, but it can also make exports cheaper, which is often an attempt to stimulate economic recovery. The strengthening of the currency during a recession would be unusual and is not directly related to a fall in living standards. Thus, this option is not correct in this context. Lastly, option D. There would be a rise in the level of immigration. In a recession, immigration often decreases, not increases. Economic downturns reduce job opportunities, making the country less attractive to potential immigrants. Additionally, recessions lead to lower wages and fewer opportunities, which could make the country less desirable for those considering migration. Therefore, this option does not explain why living standards would fall during a recession. Moving to the third question. Which components, in addition to gross domestic product, GDP, per head, are included in the Human Development Index, HDI? A. Average earnings and inequalities of incomes. B. Balance of trade and balance of payments. C. Life expectancy at birth and expected years of schooling. D. Size of population and age structure of population. This question is from year 2022 May-June version 1. The correct answer for this question is option C. This is a repeat question, we just saw it. Moving to the fourth question. The Human Development Index, HDI, is one indicator of a country's living standards. What is included in the HDI? A. Birth rate, unemployment rate, number of schools. B. Death rate, inflation rate, mean years of education. C. Life expectancy, income per head, mean years of education. D. Life expectancy, total GDP, number of schools. This question is from year 2022 February-March version 2. The correct answer for this question is option C. Life expectancy, income per head, mean years of education. The Human Development Index, HDI, is a composite measure used to assess and compare the overall development of countries, focusing on the well-being of their citizens. HDI includes three key dimensions. 1. Life expectancy. This represents the health dimension and measures the average number of years a person can expect to live, reflecting the general health and longevity of a population. 2. Income per head, gross national income per capita. This is the economic dimension and represents the standard of living, indicating the average income of a country's citizens adjusted for purchasing power parity, PPP. 3. Mean years of education. This represents the education dimension, measuring the average number of years of schooling received by people aged 25 and older, reflecting access to and the quality of education. These three dimensions are combined to create the HDI, which ranges from 0, lowest human development, to 1, highest human development. Analyzing the other options. Option A. Birth rate, unemployment rate, number of schools, is incorrect because birth rate and unemployment rate are not part of the HDI. Birth rate is a demographic indicator, while unemployment is a labor market indicator. The number of schools is also not used in the HDI. The HDI focuses on the broader indicators of health, education, and income rather than specific demographic or institutional factors. Next, option B. Death rate, inflation rate, mean years of education, is incorrect because death rate and inflation rate are not included in the HDI. The HDI includes life expectancy, which indirectly captures mortality and general health, but not the death rate specifically. Inflation rate is also not part of the HDI, as it is an economic indicator related to price stability, not the well-being or development of a population. Lastly, option D. Life expectancy, total GDP, number of schools is incorrect, because while life expectancy is a component of HDI, total GDP is not. HDI uses income per head, or GNI per capita, rather than total GDP, which gives a better measure of individual economic well-being. Additionally, the number of schools is not directly used in the HDI, rather, mean years of schooling and expected years of schooling are the education indicators used. Moving to the fifth question. The table shows statistics for 4 countries, A to D. Which country has the lowest standard of living? This question is from year 2021 October-November version 1. The correct answer for this question is option D. To determine the standard of living among these countries, we typically look at several indicators such as life expectancy, real GDP per head, and other factors like population density and population growth rate. These indicators can provide insight into the overall well-being and economic prosperity of a country. Life expectancy is a key indicator of the overall health and longevity of a population. Higher life expectancy generally suggests a better standard of living. Country B has the highest life expectancy, 58 years, while Country D has the lowest, 44 years. Real GDP per head measures the average income of a country's citizens. Country B has the highest GDP per head, $1,700, while countries A, C, and D all have significantly lower GDPs per head, $190 for A and D, $210 for C. A higher GDP per head suggests higher standards of living, so B stands out in this regard. Population density, while this may influence living conditions, it doesn't directly measure living standards. Country D has the highest population density, 89 people per square kilometer, which could suggest more crowded living conditions and potential pressures on infrastructure and services. Population growth rate. A high population growth rate, as seen in Country D with 4.2%, might indicate challenges such as overpopulation and strain on resources, which could negatively impact living standards. D has the lowest standard of living because low life expectancy, 44 years. This is the lowest life expectancy of the four countries, suggesting poorer health and lower overall well-being. Low real GDP per head, $190. This is the same as Country A, but much lower than the GDP in Country B, which suggests lower economic prosperity and income levels for citizens. High population growth rate, 4.2%, and population density, 89. A high population growth rate combined with high population density can put significant pressure on resources, infrastructure, and services, making it more difficult for people to maintain a high standard of living. Gross domestic product, GDP, is a better measure of comparative living standards when it is adjusted for the effects of A. Exports and inflation. B. Imports and exports. C. Population change and exports. D. Population change and inflation. This question is from year 2021 May-June version 1. The correct answer for this question is option D. Population change and inflation. Gross domestic product, GDP, is a common measure of a country's economic output, but it doesn't account for all factors that can influence living standards or well-being. To make GDP a better indicator for comparing living standards, it is important to adjust for factors that distort its true representation. The key adjustments needed are for population change and inflation, which are the most common factors that affect the real value of GDP and its relevance to living standards. 1. Population change. As a country's population grows, its total GDP may increase simply because more people are producing goods and services. However, GDP per capita, GDP divided by the population, adjusts for this, offering a better measure of how the average person is doing economically. Without adjusting for population change, we might assume a higher standard of living simply because of a larger economy. 2. Inflation. Inflation erodes the value of money over time. A country's GDP might appear to grow, but if inflation is high, the real purchasing power of income might be much lower than it seems. To account for this, real GDP, adjusted for inflation, is used rather than nominal GDP. Real GDP reflects the actual growth in goods and services produced, not just an increase in prices. When GDP is adjusted for both population change, through GDP per capita, and inflation, through real GDP, it provides a more accurate and meaningful measure of the standard of living across different countries or over time. Analyzing the other options. Option A. Exports and inflation. While inflation is a relevant factor for adjusting GDP, to get real GDP, exports do not directly affect the measure of living standards in the way population change does. Exports contribute to GDP but are not typically used to adjust GDP for comparative living standards. Living standards are more about the average income or output per person, not just the amount a country sells abroad. Next, option B, imports and exports. Similar to option A, imports and exports affect a country's GDP, but they don't directly adjust for factors that impact living standards. Imports and exports reflect trade but don't account for the internal economic changes or inflation that affect average citizens' wealth. Lastly, option C, population change and exports. While population change is crucial for adjusting GDP to reflect living standards, exports are not a factor that needs to be adjusted for when measuring living standards. Exports can boost GDP but do not directly affect how much income individuals have or their purchasing power within a country. Moving to the seventh question. Which country is likely to have the highest standard of living? This question is from year 2021, February-March version 2. The correct answer for this question is option D. To assess the standard of living in a country, we typically consider indicators such as life expectancy, birth rate, death rate, and infant mortality rate. These factors provide insight into the health and general well-being of a population. Looking at option D, we see that life expectancy is a critical indicator, and country D has one of the highest life expectancies at 79 years. Infant mortality in country D, 22, is lower than in country A, 31, and country B, 29, suggesting better healthcare for mothers and children. The death rate of 5 in country D is the lowest, which indicates a healthier population. Birth rate in country D, 25, is moderate, suggesting a manageable population growth. When compared with the other countries, country D consistently scores better across these important health indicators, making it the country most likely to have the highest standard of living. Moving to the eighth question. Why is the Human Development Index, HDI, a better indicator of comparative living standards than gross domestic product, GDP, per head? A. It includes international trade. B. It includes more measures of living standards. C. It is measured in money terms. D. It is more directly linked to economic growth. This question is from year 2020 specimen version 1. The correct answer for this question is option B. It includes more measures of living standards. The Human Development Index, HDI, is considered a better indicator of comparative living standards than gross domestic product, GDP, per head because it goes beyond just economic output, GDP, to include other key factors that affect people's well-being. Specifically, the HDI incorporates not only income, measured by GNI per capita, but also other dimensions like health, life expectancy, and education, mean years of schooling and expected years of schooling. This provides a broader and more comprehensive picture of living standards, which includes not only economic wealth but also social and health outcomes. When we look at option B, it is correct because the HDI includes 3 key dimensions. 1. Life expectancy, health dimension, measures the average number of years a person can expect to live, reflecting overall health conditions in a country. 2. Education dimension, measures the average years of schooling for adults, mean years of schooling, and expected years of schooling for children. 3. Income economic dimension, measured by gross national income, GNI, per capita, which reflects the economic standard of living. By including these multiple dimensions, the HDI offers a more holistic view of a country's living standards, incorporating factors beyond just economic wealth. GDP per head, or GNI per capita, on the other hand, only measures economic output and income, ignoring important factors like health and education. Analyzing the other options. Option A. It includes international trade, is incorrect. The HDI does not include international trade directly. While trade may affect economic growth and wealth, HDI focuses on health, education, and income within the country, not trade or external economic factors. Next, option C. It is measured in money terms, is incorrect. While GDP per head is expressed in monetary terms, the HDI is not solely measured in money. The HDI uses a combination of indices, e.g., life expectancy, education, that are not directly tied to monetary values, making it more comprehensive and multidimensional. Lastly, option D. It is more directly linked to economic growth, is also incorrect. The HDI is not just a measure of economic growth. While GDP per head directly reflects economic output and growth, HDI includes non-economic factors, health and education, and is not solely concerned with economic growth. It's designed to reflect the overall well-being of a population, not just its economic progress. Moving to the 9th question. One of the indicators of living standards is the Human Development Index, HDI. What is not taken into consideration when calculating the HDI? A. Education. B. Income per head. C. Level of savings. D. Life expectancy. This question is from year 2020 October, November, version 3. The correct answer for this question is option C. The level of savings is not a factor considered in the calculation of the HDI. Savings can have an impact on economic development, but it is not directly measured as part of the HDI. The HDI is more concerned with indicators that directly affect human well-being, health, education, and income, rather than financial factors like savings, which do not necessarily reflect the living standards of the population. Analyzing the other options. Option A. Education is incorrect. Education is a critical component of the HDI. The two indicators for education in the HDI are mean years of schooling and expected years of schooling, which reflect the access to and quality of education in a country. Next, option B. Income per head is incorrect. Income per head, specifically GNI per capita, is one of the three key dimensions of the HDI. It reflects the standard of living and economic well-being of a population. Lastly, option D. Life expectancy is incorrect. Life expectancy is another key component of the HDI. It is used to measure the health dimension of human development and reflects the overall longevity of a country's population. Moving to the 10th question. The Human Development Index, HDI, ranks human development in countries from 0, lowest, to 1, highest. What does the calculation of HDI not take into consideration? A. Estimate of life expectancy at birth. B. Information on the number of years of schooling. C. Regional inequalities of investments in human capital. D. Standard of living linked to income per head. This question is from year 2020 February-March version 2. The correct answer for this question is option C. The HDI does not account for regional inequalities within a country. It is a national level index, meaning it looks at the average values of health, education, and income across the entire country. The HDI does not measure disparities between regions or populations within a country, such as differences in investments in education, healthcare, or income across urban and rural areas. These regional inequalities are not considered in the HDI calculation. Analyzing the other options. Option A. Estimate of life expectancy at birth is incorrect. Life expectancy at birth is one of the core components of the HDI. It is used to measure the health dimension, reflecting the overall longevity and health conditions in a country. Next, option B. Information on the number of years of schooling is incorrect. The HDI includes information on mean years of schooling, for adults aged 25 and older, and expected years of schooling, for children of school entry age. Education is a central component of the HDI. Lastly, option D. Standard of living linked to income per head is also incorrect. Income per head, or GNI per capita, is an essential part of the HDI, reflecting the economic standard of living in a country. It is the third key dimension in the HDI calculation, alongside life expectancy and education. Moving to the 11th question. What are the components of the Human Development Index, HDI? A. Life expectancy at birth, expected years of schooling, GDP. B. Life expectancy at birth, expected years of schooling, GDP per head. C. Population growth, adult literacy rate, GDP per head. D. Population size, expected years of schooling, number of doctors per head. This question is from year 2019 October, November, version 1. The correct answer for this question is option B. Life expectancy at birth, expected years of schooling, and GNI per capita are the three key components of the HDI. This combination gives a more holistic view of human development, taking into account both economic factors and non-economic indicators like health and education. Moving to the 12th question. Which indicator would be included in the Human Development Index, HDI, for a country? A. Adult literacy rate. B. Doctors per 1,000 people. C. Unemployment rate. D. Years spent in education. This question is from year 2019 October, November, version 3. The correct answer for this question is option D. Years spent in education is directly related to the education dimension of the HDI. The HDI uses data on mean years of schooling and expected years of schooling, which are both measures of how much education a population receives and how much education a future generation is likely to obtain. Analyzing the other options. Option A. Adult literacy rate is incorrect. Although the adult literacy rate is a good indicator of education, it is not directly included in the HDI. The HDI uses mean years of schooling and expected years of schooling instead. Next, option B. Doctors per 1,000 people is incorrect. The number of doctors per 1,000 people is not part of the HDI, although it is an important indicator of health services and infrastructure. The HDI uses life expectancy as the health indicator, not the number of healthcare professionals. Lastly, option C. Unemployment rate is incorrect. The unemployment rate is not included in the HDI. While unemployment can impact the standard of living, it is not one of the components of the HDI, which focuses on life expectancy, education, and income via GNI per capita. Moving to the 13th question. Why was the Human Development Index, HDI, introduced as a measure of the standard of living? A. Education and healthcare are important contributors to the standard of living. B. GDP per head only measures development. C. Inequality can only be measured by HDI. D. Literacy rates are not an effective measure of the standard of living. This question is from year 2019 October, November, version 2. The correct answer for this question is option A. The HDI was specifically designed to include education and healthcare alongside income, acknowledging that these factors play a crucial role in improving people's lives. By including life expectancy and education levels, the HDI recognizes that development is about more than just economic growth, it's about improving people's health, education, and overall well-being. Analyzing the other options. Option B, GDP per head only measures development, is incorrect. While GDP per capita is an important measure of economic output, it does not fully measure development. GDP per capita reflects income levels, but it does not take into account other important factors like health and education, which are essential to understanding living standards. HDI was introduced to address these limitations by incorporating health and education alongside income. Next, option C, inequality can only be measured by HDI, is incorrect. While the HDI does not directly measure inequality, it can be adjusted for inequality through the Inequality Adjusted Human Development Index, IHDI. The IHDI accounts for disparities in the distribution of each of the HDI components, health, education, and income, but inequality itself is not the primary purpose of the HDI. HDI itself is focused on the average development level of a country. Lastly, option D, literacy rates are not an effective measure of the standard of living, is incorrect. Literacy rates are an important indicator of education, but the HDI does not use literacy rates directly. Instead, the HDI uses mean years of schooling and expected years of schooling, which are considered more comprehensive measures of educational attainment. However, literacy rates still provide valuable information about the educational level of a population, but HDI was designed to go beyond just literacy to include overall educational attainment. Moving to the 14th question. Given the following information, which country is most likely to have the highest standard of living? This question is from year 2019 May-June version 1. The correct answer for this question is option D. Brunei has the highest life expectancy, 72 years, which suggests a better overall healthcare system and standard of living. Brunei also has the lowest infant mortality rate, 22, indicating better healthcare and living conditions for newborns. Brunei has a relatively low birth rate, 25, which suggests more stable demographic growth. While Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Botswana have relatively lower life expectancy and higher infant mortality rates, indicating worse overall living conditions compared to Brunei. Analyzing the other countries. Bangladesh, while its birth and death rates are moderate, its life expectancy, 58 years, is lower, and its infant mortality rate, 93, is much higher than Brunei's. This suggests poorer healthcare and living conditions compared to Brunei. Next, looking at Bhutan, although Bhutan has a lower death rate, its life expectancy is still lower than Brunei's, 53 years, and its infant mortality rate is higher, 107, indicating worse healthcare outcomes. Lastly, for Botswana, Botswana has the lowest life expectancy, 40 years, and a higher infant mortality rate, 57, which suggests that it has significant health challenges. Despite having a moderate birth rate, these factors imply lower living standards than Brunei. Moving to the 15th question. What would not increase the Human Development Index, HDI, of a country? A. An increase in the level of car ownership. B. An increase in life expectancy at birth. C. A rise in the GDP per head. D. A rise in the number of years of schooling. This question is from year 2019 May-June version 1. The correct answer for this question is option A. Car ownership is not part of the HDI calculation. While owning a car might be seen as an indicator of economic development or improved living standards, it does not directly affect the health, education, or income components that make up the HDI. Car ownership does not reflect improvements in health outcomes, educational attainment, or average income levels, all of which are crucial for increasing HDI. Analyzing the other options. Option B, an increase in life expectancy at birth, is incorrect. Life expectancy is a key component of the HDI and directly reflects the health dimension of the index. An increase in life expectancy would improve a country's HDI by indicating better health outcomes and overall living conditions. Next, option C, a rise in the GDP per head, is incorrect. GDP per head, or GNI per capita, is a critical part of the HDI's standard of living dimension. An increase in GDP per head indicates a rise in income, which directly raises the HDI. Lastly, option D, a rise in the number of years of schooling, is also incorrect. The HDI measures education through mean years of schooling and expected years of schooling. An increase in either of these educational indicators would increase the HDI, as it reflects better access to education and improved educational outcomes. Moving to the 16th question. Why is the Human Development Index, HDI, a better measure of living standards than GDP per head? A. It takes into account changes in output. B. It takes into account changes in population. C. It takes into account health and education data. D. It takes into account inflation. This question is from year 2019 May-June version 2. The correct answer for this question is option C. Health and education are central to improving living standards, and they have a significant impact on the quality of life. HDI accounts for these non-economic factors, which GDP per head does not. A country with high income, GDP per head, but poor health or low education standards may still have a lower overall living standard than a country with lower income but better health and education outcomes. By including life expectancy and education data, HDI gives a broader and more accurate measure of living standards. Analyzing the other options. Option A. It takes into account changes in output, is incorrect. While GDP per head does measure economic output, production, the HDI does not specifically focus on changes in output. GDP measures economic performance, but HDI is concerned with human development. Focusing on broader indicators like health, education, and income, rather than just economic output. Next, option B. It takes into account changes in population, is incorrect. Both HDI and GDP per head are adjusted for population size, as GDP per head is GDP divided by population, and HDI uses GNI per capita, which is also adjusted for population. However, HDI does not explicitly focus on changes in population as a factor in determining living standards. Lastly, option D. It takes into account inflation, is also incorrect. The HDI does not directly account for inflation. However, GDP per head can be adjusted for inflation to measure real GDP per capita, which reflects the real value of output. HDI, on the other hand, adjusts for purchasing power parity, PPP, to account for differences in cost of living between countries, but inflation itself is not a factor in the HDI. Moving to the 17th question. What is included in the Human Development Index, HDI? A. Gender inequality. B. Life expectancy at birth. C. Political freedom. D. The impact of pollution. This question is from year 2019 May-June version 3. The correct answer for this question is option B. Life expectancy at birth is one of the 3 key indicators used to calculate the HDI, specifically representing the health dimension. It gives an estimate of the average number of years a person can expect to live, which is a critical measure of the overall well-being of a population. Analyzing the other options. Option A. Gender inequality is incorrect. While gender inequality is a critical issue in human development, it is not part of the HDI. However, the Gender Inequality Index, GII, a separate measure developed by the UNDP, specifically focuses on gender inequality in areas like reproductive health, empowerment, and economic activity. Gender inequality is not considered in the HDI itself. Next, option C. Political freedom is incorrect. Political freedom or civil liberties is not included in the HDI. The HDI focuses on health, education, and income dimensions of development. While political freedom is an important factor in overall human development, it is not part of the HDI, which does not consider political rights or freedoms. Lastly, option D. The impact of pollution is also incorrect. The HDI does not directly account for the impact of pollution or environmental factors. While pollution and environmental degradation can influence the standard of living, these factors are not included in the HDI calculation. Environmental concerns may be addressed through other indicators, but HDI does not explicitly measure them. Moving to the 18th question. A country has the highest GDP per head in the world. What is this information most likely to suggest about the country? A. It has the world's biggest economy. B. It has the world's fastest economic growth rate. C. It has the world's greatest size of population. D. It has the world's highest standard of living. This question is from year 2019 February-March version 2. The correct answer for this question is option D. GDP per head represents the average income of people in a country. A high GDP per head suggests that, on average, people in that country have more income to spend on goods, services, and other life-enhancing activities, which usually leads to a higher standard of living. This measure is closely related to the economic prosperity of the citizens, even though it doesn't directly account for factors like wealth inequality, healthcare, or education. Analyzing the other options. Option A. It has the world's biggest economy, is incorrect. Having the highest GDP per head does not necessarily mean the country has the largest economy in total. A country with a small population could have a high GDP per head, e.g., Luxembourg, Qatar, but this does not mean it has the largest overall GDP. The largest economies in the world, such as the United States and China, have large populations, so their GDP per head is lower despite their overall GDP being the highest. Next, option B. It has the world's fastest economic growth rate, is incorrect. GDP per head is a measure of income per person, not the rate of economic growth. A country with the highest GDP per head could have slow or steady growth, while other countries with faster growth may have a lower GDP per head. The growth rate is measured by the change in GDP over time, not by the level of GDP per head. Lastly, option C. It has the world's greatest size of population, is incorrect. GDP per head is a measure of income per person, not the total size of the population. A country with a small population but high GDP, such as Luxembourg or Switzerland, can have a very high GDP per head, even though its population size is not the largest. Countries with large populations, such as China or India, tend to have lower GDP per head compared to small, wealthy countries. Moving to the 19th question. What is included in the Human Development Index, HDI, of a country? A. Level of net immigration. B. Life expectancy at birth. C. Population size. D. Rate of population growth. This question is from year 2019 February-March version 2. The correct answer for this question is option B. This is a repeat question, we just saw this. Moving to the 20th question. The government of a developing country allows a multinational mining company to mine minerals in order to improve the standard of living of the local people. Which action by the multinational company, MNC, will not lead to an improvement in the standard of living of the local people? A. Building roads to assist transport. B. Exporting mineral ore. C. Providing skills training. D. Returning profits overseas. This question is from year 2018 May-June version 1. The correct answer for this question is option D. Returning profits overseas does not lead to a direct improvement in the standard of living of the local people. While the multinational company may provide temporary jobs or infrastructure improvements, if most of the profits are taken out of the country, the long-term benefits to the local economy are minimal. Local workers and communities may not see significant long-term improvements in income, services, or infrastructure if the company's profits are not reinvested locally. Analyzing the other options. Option A. Building roads to assist transport, is incorrect. Building roads for transportation can significantly improve the standard of living of the local population. Improved infrastructure allows for easier access to markets, healthcare, education, and other essential services. It can also facilitate the movement of goods, creating job opportunities and boosting the local economy. Road development is typically a direct way in which an MNC can contribute to improving living standards. Next, option B. Exporting mineral ore, is incorrect. While exporting mineral ore itself does not directly improve the standard of living of the local people, it is a way for the country to generate revenue. The government can use the revenue from the sale of minerals to fund public goods, infrastructure, healthcare, education, and social services, all of which can indirectly raise the standard of living. However, this depends on how the revenue is managed and spent by the government. Lastly, option C, providing skills training, is also incorrect. Providing skills training can help improve the employability of the local population and lead to long-term improvements in the standard of living. Training local workers in specific skills can help them get better-paying jobs, reduce dependency on foreign labor, and create opportunities for entrepreneurship and community development. This action has a positive impact on human capital development and standard of living. Moving to question 21. Why is the Human Development Index, HDI, often considered to be better than Gross Domestic Product, GDP, per head as a measure of living standards? A. GDP per head excludes economic growth. B. GDP per head ignores population growth. C. HDI includes more than the production of goods and services. D. HDI is calculated by the national government. This question is from year 2017 October-November version 1. The correct answer for this question is option C. HDI includes more than the production of goods and services. While GDP per head is focused on economic output, the total value of goods and services produced in a country divided by its population, HDI takes into account health, life expectancy, and education, schooling levels, both of which have a significant impact on the overall living standards and quality of life. By considering these additional factors, HDI provides a more comprehensive measure of human development and living standards. Analyzing the other options. Option A, GDP per head excludes economic growth, is incorrect. GDP per head is a measure of economic output per person, and it is directly linked to a country's economic growth. Economic growth is reflected in the increase in GDP, and this will usually result in higher GDP per head. However, GDP per head does not consider the distribution of wealth, health, or education, which is why it's a limited measure of living standards. Next, option B, GDP per head ignores population growth, is incorrect. GDP per head is calculated by dividing a country's GDP by its population, so it inherently takes population size into account. It does not ignore population growth, but it does not measure how that population's well-being improves over time. A growing population can mean a lower GDP per head, even if total GDP is increasing. Lastly, option D, HDI is calculated by the national government, is also incorrect. While national governments play a role in collecting data, HDI is calculated by the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, not by national governments. The UNDP uses data on health, education, and income from various sources, including national governments, international organizations, and research institutions, to calculate the HDI for each country. Moving to question 22. A country has a low GDP and a large population but ranks relatively highly on the HDI. Which combination may exist in the country? This question is from year 2017 May-June version 1. The correct answer for this question is option D. Low income per head. The country has a low GDP, so the average income of its citizens is low. This could be due to economic underdevelopment, or the country might not be rich in resources. High provision of education and healthcare, merit goods. Despite the low income, the country may have strong public services in education and healthcare, ensuring good access to these essential services. This would lead to higher education levels and better health outcomes, contributing to a higher HDI score. In this case, education and healthcare are critical for improving human development and can lead to a higher HDI even in the absence of high income. Countries in this situation might prioritize investments in human capital, focusing on improving the well-being of their population through universal education and public health services, even if their GDP per capita is low. Analyzing the other options. Option A, high income per head, high provision of education and healthcare. This combination typically results in a high HDI. However, the question specifies that the country has low GDP. Therefore, a high income per head is inconsistent with the conditions described in the question. Next, option B, high income per head, low provision of education and healthcare, would likely result in a lower HDI, as high income alone is insufficient to achieve a high HDI ranking. The provision of education and healthcare are essential for improving health and education outcomes, which are key HDI components. Without strong education and healthcare systems, HDI would be lower. Lastly, option C, low income per head, low provision of education and healthcare. While this may seem plausible, it is unlikely to result in a high HDI. If both income per head and the provision of essential services like education and healthcare are low, this would likely lower the HDI score, not raise it. HDI requires a balance of all three components, income, education, and health, and without improvements in education and healthcare, HDI would be low. Moving to question 23. The table gives information about 4 countries. Which country is likely to have the highest standard of living? This question is from year 2017 May-June version 1. The correct answer for this question is option C. In terms of life expectancy of 61 years, this is the highest among the countries, suggesting better healthcare, nutrition, and general well-being. In terms GDP per head of 450, this is the highest GDP per capita in the table, indicating higher income levels, which is a strong indicator of a higher standard of living. And also, in terms of 52% of labor force in service industries. A larger share of the workforce in service industries suggests that the economy is more developed, with more people working in higher value sectors, which can result in better wages and living conditions. Analyzing the other countries. Country A has the lowest GDP per head, 250, which suggests lower income and likely lower living standards. Next, country B has a higher GDP per head, 400, than country A, but its life expectancy, 51 years, is lower than that of country C, and the percentage of the labor force in service industries is the same as in country C, 52%. Lastly, country D has the same life expectancy as country C, 61 years, and a similar GDP per head, 400, but the percentage of the labor force in service industries is lower, 40%, which suggests a less developed economy with a lower share of people working in higher value-added sectors. This could imply lower wages and a lower standard of living compared to country C. Moving to question 24. Why is nominal gross domestic product not a good measure to compare the standard of living in a country between 2 years? A. It does not account for inflation. B. It does not allow for savings. C. It does not include government expenditure. D. It only compares export prices with import prices. This question is from year 2016 October, November, version 2. The correct answer for this question is option A. Nominal GDP does not account for inflation, which means that any increase in nominal GDP could simply reflect higher prices rather than actual growth in the economy or improvements in the standard of living. For example, if nominal GDP increases by 5% from one year to the next, but inflation is also 5%, there has been no real increase in economic output or living standards. Real GDP would eliminate the effects of inflation, allowing for a more accurate comparison of living standards between 2 years. Analyzing the other options. Option B. It does not allow for savings, is incorrect. Nominal GDP does not directly measure savings, but it also doesn't exclude them. Savings are part of the economy's overall activity, but they are not a direct factor in GDP measurement. The issue with nominal GDP is more about how it accounts for inflation rather than how savings are handled. Next, option C. It does not include government expenditure, is incorrect. Nominal GDP does include all government expenditure as part of the calculation. In fact, government spending is a significant component of GDP, along with consumption, investment, and net exports. The issue with nominal GDP is not its inclusion of government expenditure but its failure to adjust for inflation. Lastly, option D. It only compares export prices with import prices, is also incorrect. Nominal GDP is the total value of goods and services produced in the economy and includes all components: consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports, exports minus imports. While the trade balance, exports minus imports, affects GDP, nominal GDP is not specifically focused on comparing export prices with import prices. Moving to question 25. Which measures, in addition to gross domestic product per capita, are included in the Human Development Index? A. Average earnings and inequalities of incomes. B. Balance of trade and balance of payments. C. Life expectancy at birth and expected years of schooling. D. Size of population and age structure of population. This question is from year 2016 May-June version 3. The correct answer for this question is option C. The Human Development Index, HDI, includes life expectancy at birth, health, and expected years of schooling, education, both of which are crucial for assessing the quality of life in a country. These two additional factors help to broaden the measurement of human development beyond just economic output, GDP per capita, to include health and education, which are central to the overall well-being of the population. Analyzing the other options. Option A. Average earnings and inequalities of incomes, is incorrect. While income inequality can be an important measure of development, and is specifically captured in the Inequality-Adjusted HDI, IHDI, the standard HDI does not directly include information on income inequality or average earnings. It uses gross national income, GNI, per capita to measure income, but it does not factor in income distribution or inequality. Next, option B. Balance of trade and balance of payments, is incorrect. The balance of trade, exports minus imports, and balance of payments, the record of all financial transactions made between a country and the rest of the world, are not included in the HDI. The HDI focuses on health, education, and income per capita, but does not take into account international trade or financial transactions. Lastly, option D, size of population and age structure of population, is also incorrect. While the size and age structure of a population can have important economic and social implications, these factors are not included in the HDI calculation. The HDI focuses on measuring the quality of life through health, education, and income, rather than demographic factors like population size or age structure. Moving to question 26. A country has a very high gross domestic product and a small population but has a low standard of living. What may be the cause of this low standard of living? A. There is a high inequality of income distribution and a high provision of merit goods. B. There is a high inequality of income distribution and a limited provision of merit goods. C. There is equality of income distribution and a high provision of merit goods. D. There is equality of income distribution and a low provision of merit goods. This question is from year 2016 May-June version 2. The correct answer for this question is option B. High inequality of income distribution means that even though the country may have a high GDP, most people may not have access to the wealth generated. This is a key factor that leads to a low standard of living for the majority of the population. Limited provision of merit goods means that services such as education, healthcare, and social welfare may not be adequately provided to the public, affecting their overall quality of life. This lack of access to essential services contributes significantly to a low standard of living. Analyzing the other options. Option A. There is a high inequality of income distribution and a high provision of merit goods, is incorrect because high provision of merit goods would likely improve the standard of living, even if income inequality is high. While high inequality can still lead to a lower standard of living for most people, the high provision of merit goods, like public healthcare, education, and infrastructure, would help mitigate some of the negative effects of inequality. Next, option C. There is equality of income distribution and a high provision of merit goods, is incorrect because equality of income distribution and high provision of merit goods would typically lead to a higher standard of living. If income is distributed equally and essential services are widely available, the majority of the population would likely experience a higher standard of living. Therefore, this is not consistent with the situation described in the question, where the country has a low standard of living. Lastly, option D. There is equality of income distribution and a low provision of merit goods, is also incorrect because equality of income distribution would typically result in a higher standard of living, even with a low provision of merit goods. While a lack of merit goods can lower living standards, the overall equality of income would still likely lead to better living conditions for most people compared to a situation with high inequality. Moving to question 27. How is a sharp rise in the price of oil likely to be seen by different oil-consuming countries? This question is from year 2015 October-November version 1. The correct answer for this question is option D. A sharp rise in oil prices is undesirable for both low-income and high-income countries, but it is generally more manageable for high-income countries due to their economic resilience and ability to adjust. For low-income countries, while it is undesirable, they often have ways to mitigate the impact, example, subsidies or international aid, but it remains a manageable challenge. Moving to question 28. GDP per head is regarded as a poor measure of living standards because it omits A. Environmental changes. B. Exports. C. The income of the poor. D. The profits of private businesses. This question is from year 2015 October-November version 3. The correct answer for this question is option A. Environmental changes are important factors affecting the quality of life and long-term sustainability of a country, but GDP per head ignores these changes. A country could have a high GDP per head but be depleting its natural resources or harming its environment in ways that ultimately reduce the standard of living for its citizens. For example, the extraction of natural resources or the pollution generated by industries might contribute to GDP in the short term, but can undermine future living standards by reducing the quality of the environment, people's health, and the availability of resources. Analyzing the other options. Option B, exports, is incorrect. Exports are part of a country's GDP calculation through the net export component, exports minus imports. While GDP per head does not give specific details about the trade balance, exports themselves are accounted for in the GDP measurement, so this is not a limitation of GDP per head as a measure of living standards. Next, option C, the income of the poor, is also incorrect. While GDP per head is an average and does not show income inequality, it does not specifically omit the income of the poor. However, it fails to capture the distribution of income. The real issue is that GDP per head may not reflect how income is distributed within a country, but it does not omit the income of poorer people altogether. For example, GDP per head will still increase if the rich are getting richer, even if the poor are not benefiting. Lastly, option D, the profits of private businesses, is also incorrect. Private business profits are included in GDP, as they contribute to the overall economic output. The income from business profits, wages, and government spending all contribute to GDP. While GDP per head does not specify the breakdown of profits versus wages, it still includes the total output of businesses and their contributions to the economy. Moving to question 29. Why might real GDP per head not be a good indicator of the standard of living in developing countries? A. It does not account for inflation. B. It does not account for population changes. C. It does not include primary production. D. It does not include unpaid work on farms. This question is from year 2015 October, November, version 2. The correct answer for this question is option D. Unpaid work on farms, such as subsistence farming, is a common activity in many developing countries, particularly in rural areas, where people grow food for their families and do not engage in formal markets. Since this work is not part of the formal economy, it is not included in the GDP calculation. However, this work still contributes to people's well-being, as it provides food, shelter, and other essentials. Real GDP per head overlooks this form of informal economic activity, which leads to an underestimation of the standard of living in countries where subsistence farming and other non-market activities are prevalent. Analyzing the other options. Option A. It does not account for inflation, is incorrect. Real GDP specifically adjusts for inflation, meaning it reflects the real value of goods and services produced over time, rather than the nominal or face value. Real GDP per head removes the effects of inflation, which makes it a better measure for comparing economic output over time. Therefore, it does account for inflation. Next, option B. It does not account for population changes, is incorrect. Real GDP per head is calculated by dividing real GDP by the population. This means that it inherently adjusts for changes in population, as it gives the average economic output per person. Therefore, changes in population size are already accounted for in the real GDP per head measure. Lastly, option C. It does not include primary production, is also incorrect. Primary production, such as agriculture, mining, and fishing, is included in GDP. In fact, primary industries make up a significant part of the economy in many developing countries, and their output is reflected in GDP calculations. The issue with real GDP per head in developing countries is not the exclusion of primary production, but the failure to capture non-market activities, such as subsistence farming and other unpaid work, which are often a large part of economic activity in these regions. Moving to question 30. Which item does the Human Development Index, HDI, of a country include, in addition to real GDP per head and life expectancy at birth? A. Expenditure on law and order. B. Literacy rate among adults. C. Number of doctors. D. Retirement age. This question is from year 2015 October, November, version 2. The correct answer for this question is option B. The literacy rate among adults is a measure of education, which is one of the dimensions included in the HDI, alongside life expectancy and GNI per capita. Although it is not directly used in the HDI calculation, it is an important indicator of a country's education level and is often associated with the educational component of HDI. Analyzing the other options. Option A, expenditure on law and order, is incorrect because the HDI does not consider expenditure on law and order. The HDI focuses on health, education, and income per capita, not specific government spending allocations such as law enforcement or justice systems. Next, option C, number of doctors, is incorrect. While the number of doctors in a country may affect health outcomes and living standards, it is not directly included in the HDI. The HDI uses life expectancy at birth as its health indicator, but the number of doctors or other specific health resources is not part of the HDI calculation. Lastly, option D, retirement age, is also incorrect because the retirement age is not included in the HDI. The HDI focuses on health, education, and income levels, rather than specific policies related to retirement age or pensions. Moving to question 31. To make gross domestic product a better measure of comparative living standards, it needs to be adjusted by A. Deducting the effects of exports and inflation. B. Deducting the effects of imports and exports. C. Deducting the effects of population change and exports. D. Deducting the effects of population change and inflation. This question is from year 2015 October, November, version 1. The correct answer for this question is option D. Adjusting for inflation allows us to eliminate the effects of price increases and focus on the real growth in an economy. Adjusting for population change helps us measure GDP per capita, reflecting the average living standard of an individual, and accounts for changes in the population size. Analyzing the other options. Option A, deducting the effects of exports and inflation, is incorrect because exports are a legitimate part of GDP. The export of goods and services contributes to a country's income and is an important factor in its economic output. Adjusting for exports is not necessary to measure living standards, as exports reflect the overall economic activity. Next, option B, deducting the effects of imports and exports, is incorrect because imports and exports are part of the trade balance, net exports, which is already included in GDP calculations. The trade balance affects the GDP, but removing it would distort the real value of a country's economic output and living standards. Imports are subtracted in the GDP calculation, but exports are added. Lastly, option C, deducting the effects of population change and exports, is also incorrect because exports should not be deducted. Exports contribute positively to GDP, and removing them would not provide an accurate measure of economic output or living standards. Moving to question 32. Which combination of changes is most likely to result in a fall in living standards in a country? This question is from year 2015 May-June version 2. The correct answer for this question is option B. GDP, gross domestic product, fall in GDP. A decline in GDP means that the economy is producing fewer goods and services. A reduction in GDP typically indicates economic contraction, which can lead to lower income, fewer jobs, and reduced economic opportunities. A fall in GDP generally leads to a fall in living standards, because people have less income to spend on goods and services. Inflation, rise in inflation. When inflation increases, the cost of living rises. This means that the purchasing power of individuals decreases, as their money buys fewer goods and services. Even if wages remain constant, the real value of income falls, leading to a decrease in living standards. A higher inflation rate can erode savings and reduce people's ability to afford everyday goods and services, making it harder to maintain or improve their standard of living. And population, rise in population. An increase in the population means that there are more people competing for the same resources, such as food, housing, and jobs. If GDP is falling, but the population is rising, this can result in a dilution of resources per person. Essentially, there will be more people sharing the same or fewer resources, which can put pressure on living standards and potentially cause them to fall. Thus, a fall in GDP, a rise in inflation, and a rise in population are likely to combine to reduce living standards, as each factor negatively impacts people's ability to access goods, services, and overall well-being. Moving to question 33. The Human Development Index, HDI, measures more than just average incomes. What are two additional measures it includes? This question is from year 2015, May-June version 2. The correct answer for this question is option A. Life expectancy is one of the key components of HDI, representing the health dimension. It provides an indication of how long people, on average, live in a given country, which is linked to the availability of healthcare, nutrition, and overall well-being. Years of schooling, education is another crucial dimension of HDI. It is represented by the mean years of schooling, the average number of years of education that adults aged 25 and older have completed, and the expected years of schooling, the number of years of schooling a child entering school is expected to receive. These measures reflect a country's educational development, which has a strong impact on living standards. Moving to question 34. The Human Development Index can be used to measure human development in countries. Which measure would not be part of its calculation? A. Inequality of incomes. B. Life expectancy. C. Standards of living. D. Years of schooling. This question is from year 2015, May-June version 3. The correct answer for this question is option A. The HDI does not directly account for income inequality. While income inequality is an important aspect of development, it is not included in the standard HDI calculation. Instead, income is considered in aggregate terms through GNI per capita, which reflects the average income of the population but does not account for how evenly or unevenly income is distributed. A separate measure, the Inequality-Adjusted HDI, IHDI, adjusts for inequality in income, education, and health, but inequality of income is not part of the basic HDI. Analyzing the other options. Option B, life expectancy, is a key component of the HDI. It is used as the health indicator, measuring the average number of years a person can expect to live at birth. So, life expectancy is an essential part of the HDI calculation. Next, option C, standards of living, is part of the HDI, and it is measured by GNI per capita. GNI per capita reflects the average income in a country and is used to assess the material well-being or standard of living. Therefore, this is also included in the HDI. Lastly, option D, years of schooling, are a central component of the HDI's education dimension. It includes two measures, mean years of schooling, which reflects the average number of years of education received by people aged 25 and older, and expected years of schooling, which measures the total number of years of schooling a child entering the education system is expected to receive. Both indicators are used to assess the level of education in a country, and they are part of the HDI calculation. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found today's breakdown of multiple-choice questions from past economics papers helpful. Understanding why certain answers are correct, and why others are not, is key to mastering these concepts. If you enjoyed this video and want more in-depth explanations on economics topics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update from Topical Economics. Feel free to leave any questions or comments down below. I would love to hear your thoughts and help with any topics you would like me to cover next. Until next time, keep learning and stay curious about the world of economics.